definition of an entrepreneur, so I hope you really enjoyed tonight's presentation.
Wow,
So
thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. Okay, so entrepreneurship and how it applies to education. My name is Rickey Ishida, and I'm a Venture for America Fellow, and I will talk about that later. All right, so the breakdown of this presentation is going to be, one, who am I? What is Venture for America? What is entrepreneurship? How does it apply to education? And what's the future of education? And the breakdown of time is 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, for a total of 30 minutes. So it shouldn't take too long. No. So who am I? I am a Canadian-born, Japanese blood, American by heart. But aside from that, I went to Cornell University, graduated in 2010 with a degree in biomedical engineering and a little bit of mechanical engineering. And then my brother and I spent 2 years after my graduation building a house for our mother. That's a 6,000 square foot house. It's a behemoth. It's all brick siding. Some of the benefits of building your own house is you get to not cut corners, and that's one of the things. And then after doing that, I joined a fellowship program called Venture for America. And then now my next step, it's a 2-year program, and I just completed my second year. So now my next step is to enter the field of education with my knowledge of entrepreneurship and hopefully disrupt a few things for the better. So, that being said, this is kind of personal. This is what I like to do. I'm a huge fan of philanthropy. So, that hot Asian chick you see on the left is actually me with long hair after going up for 2 years. I donated recently to a company called Wigs for Kids, which is actually 20 minutes west of Cleveland. It's a fantastic organization. They take hair donations and makes wigs for kids for free, which is slightly different from Locks of Love, which still charges their patients a little more. And wigs are expensive. I mean, they go for a couple grand, so I think cancer patients kind of don't have that kind of money for aesthetics. And then another thing on the right is, this is a recent thing, there's an urban vineyard in Cleveland where a guy bought a rundown apartment, demolished it. He owns a construction company, and he planted vineyards basically by hiring a guy with 20 plus years of experience making vineyards. And now they're making wine and hiring local kids. And you see the kid with the green sweatshirt, he spent the entire day with me just plowing weeds. This was all Saturday. He's a local kid. His first job, did a fantastic job. So this is that kind of thing that drives me, is like philanthropy, and Cleveland is all about that. So I'm a huge fan of Cleveland. So enough about me, more about me. What is Venture for America? Venture for America is a 2-year fellowship program. It's modeled after Teach for America, where they take recent graduates, trains them during the summer for a little bit, and then pairs them up with startups in different cities. We have Detroit, Cleveland, Cincinnati, New Orleans, Las Vegas, all sorts of places. And the hopes that in the 2 years, we work with an entrepreneur and learn everything that has to do with entrepreneurship, and then move on to become entrepreneurs ourselves. And the idea is, let's funnel these kids, and instead of making them go to paid path like being a doctor or lawyer, those kind of professions, let's have, not that there's anything wrong with it, but let's have an alternative route, say entrepreneurship. That's not that paid path yet, and that's where Venture for America comes into play. So what does that look like? Our founder, Andrew Yang, shaking hands with Obama. He was recently recognized for his contributions. Training camp, basically you get some 20-some-year-olds fresh out of college, get them to work on startup ideas for 5 weeks. And that's really intense because you're meeting 40 different, now it's 100 different new people. You're introducing yourselves at the same time being challenged and put on competitions to start a company. And that's our new class of 2013 fellows, and it's grown. It's been doubling every year. So we started with 40, went up to about 80, and now it's about 110. So what is entrepreneurship? Everyone keeps talking about entrepreneurship like they know something, but it's not really clear yet. So this is what Google has to say. The process, the verbs are italicized and the nouns are bolded. The process of identifying and starting a new business venture, sourcing and organizing the required resources while taking both the risks and reward associated with the venture. And that's one way to put it. What does it actually look like? And marketing has done a pretty good job right now of trying to display what entrepreneurship is like. So when Facebook went IPO, Twitter went IPO, there's all these talks about, ooh, entrepreneurship is really cool. There's a whole talk about you get to wear multiple hats and do different things. You get either bought by Google or you do an IPO, make a lot of money, and it's sexy. There wasn't an image I could use here, so bear with that. And then you work hard and you play hard, and you get to drink at work. And this is all somewhat true, but this is a very insignificant portion of startup life. The more significant portion is hard work. Basically, you do get to wear multiple hats, but that means long hours, and you're always multitasking. You're not really grounded in one role. You do multiple projects at once. Financial burden is huge. Entrepreneurship, most people don't break even until 3 years, so that means you're paying to do work for 3 years. And I've seen a lot of this, stress-induced hair loss. That is a very common thing in entrepreneurship. And then, naturally an addiction to coffee. That's caffeine drives, it's like an enzyme that drives you. So that's what entrepreneurship is. It's really hard work, it's not too pleasant to be honest, it's stressful, long hours, all that. So then the question becomes, why would anyone do this? And the answer is pretty much simple, it's value creation. And Warren Buffett put this nicely, price is what you pay, value is what you get. The idea is, if you want to be on the other side of the equation where you're not paying for things, but you're actually selling things, then you have to create value. So what's an example of that? We have a great local example, which is Vitamix. It's located in Olmsted Falls. It started way back in 1920s. This guy was going through a Great Depression. He was a traveling salesman. He was helping out his friend who was having health issues, and then he realized that, there's a huge value to health, especially in the Whole Foods market, where if you eat natural foods, your health will be better and you'll be a better person overall. He was a little bit ahead of his time. It wasn't that popular back then, so the company was very stagnant until about 10 years ago, and then it just exploded. I mean, they grew from 20 people to 100 people, it stayed that way for a while, and then now they went to 500, and now they're at 2,000. They're hockey stick growth. And the idea behind it is, he said, hey look, Whole Foods is great, what's an easy way to consume that? Oh, blender. And it's that simple, but the whole idea was that value, and he stuck with it, he had grit, and then now he's a successful entrepreneur. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, now we know what entrepreneurship is. So in the past 2 years, I've learned a lot by doing entrepreneurship and working with 3 different startups in 2 different cities. And here's some few takeaways I thought was really important. One thing was managing expectations versus reality. Zappos is a star player in this. What they do is they ship shoes. That's all they do. But they have a fantastic customer relation, and it's because they set their expectations. You order from Zappos, you think you're gonna get your shoes in 7 days, because that's what they promise. What they do is actually they ship it in 2 days. So then your reality becomes beyond your expectations, whereas a lot of companies end up promising more and under-developing. So Zappos is a key player when it comes to under-promise, deliver. Another one is fail often and fail quickly. This is something that you don't learn in school because that's looked down upon. This is different from quitting. Quitting is when you run out of grit and you stop doing things. Failing is more you had an assumption, and that assumption turned out to be wrong. So you have to modify your strategy, your current stance, and pivot. And what you learn in entrepreneurship is that if you stick to a strategy with the wrong assumptions, it's going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time, and you'll most likely go under very quickly. So the idea is, yes, try different things, but make sure that you're not sticking it for the wrong reasons. If you believe in something, you should totally go for it, but if the reality does not match your assumptions, you should scrap it and readjust. And the last part is ownership. This is something I learned after college, actually. Ownership is in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of things in the backlog you have to do, and a lot of different roles you have to handle. And the question is, people are very willing to hand you projects, we'll call them balls, but there's only a certain amount of balls you can carry, and you start dropping balls, and that's when you lack ownership. So you have to understand that most entrepreneurship is saying no to opportunities, and there's a lot of opportunities that you can grab at it, but you have to be willing to say no, because once you take that ball, that ownership is on you, and if that ball gets dropped, it comes back to you. So those were all, general things that you can take away but not really use. This is more technical and specific. So what's happening in project management and entrepreneurship? Right now, the hottest thing right now is agile methodology. And what that is a lot of software companies use this right now. It's related to the Kanban methodology that Toyota uses for their production line. But basically, when you have a big backlog of things to do, instead of spending months working on that backlog, you take a little chunk of it, like a week's worth, and then you work on that for the week, and then you ship that as a product. And if that product either comes out wrong, then you fix it, or you keep doing the same thing week over week. And the idea is it's easier to shift gears when you're rolling rather than building a huge rocket and then trying to push it to adjust the angle later on, because it's just hard to change afterwards. So here's an example. You start with backlog, you make it into a week's worth of what's called a sprint of tasks to do. And then here's a little small thing that's kind of important. This is daily scrum meeting. That basically means you have a bunch of people standing in a circle, telling each other what they're going to work on that day. And if anything needs to be resolved, resolve it at that time. And what that does is it minimizes interruptions. If you interrupt someone during the day, 5 minutes, it's going to take that person 15 minutes to get back into what they were doing. So it's very expensive. So what this does is, let's put all the interruptions at the beginning of the day, and then for the rest of the day, work without interruptions. And this works fantastic, especially for software companies, because it's cheap to deploy projects. But it's very applicable to other situations like manufacturing as well. So if you're interested in agile methodology, the tools to use are Trello, Asana, and Jira in that order of difficulty. Trello, it's so easy, managers can use it. So I love that Trello product. I use it personally because you don't have to be tech savvy to know. Asana is a good compromise between Trello and Jira. And Jira is a very technical project management tool. So that's one technical thing. Another one is mind mapping. This is kind of psychology related. You know, when you're at a school or at a startup, you have so many different projects going on in different areas. It's kind of hard to keep track of everything. This is basically a way to list those different projects and group them. And basically, the studies in psychology is showing that the brain is not very good at storing information. It's good at processing information. So to store that information, you should store it somewhere else, like a mind map on a computer. And then refer back to these lists for different things to do. And there's plenty of softwares out there for free, but the one I like is MindMeister, MindMeister. And this comes in really handy if you have multiple projects going on in different parts of your life, including school, social life, philanthropy, that kind of thing. And lastly, marketing. Marketing, I mean, you all know what's going on with marketing, with people doing Facebook and Twitter and all that. Basically, the general takeaway is there's apps out there, and you should use them. And ones I like, obviously, Instagram, Pinterest for sharing pictures, because we're turning more and more, I think, into visual communities where television's taking over, where you get an iPad when you're 3 years old or 2 years old to play games on computers. Then more and more so we're turning to visuals. Then you have to appeal to that crowd. So then Instagram and Pinterest is already leading the market in there. There's collage softwares on the left. I forgot what that one's called. I'll let you know later. And then on the non-visual side, there's a software called Hootsuite, or an app called Hootsuite, which lets you manage different social networks. So when you have Google+, Facebook, and Twitter going on all at the same time, instead of logging into all three, you just manage it from one platform. That's called Hootsuite. MailChimp. I know some people use Constant Contact, but I've come to realize it's a mailing software developed by Microsoft. I've come to realize that MailChimp by far is much better, and it's free up until 2,500 users. So if you have any email campaigns that need to be done, MailChimp hands down. So these are some of the technical things that I learned that I thought I'd share today. All that being said, we went over entrepreneurship and all that. How does this all relate back to education? And I think one of the cool things about entrepreneurship is you plan for the future, because if you do things for what the current market needs, then you're going to be too late by the time you start mastering it. So then, that being said, let's look at, what do you do when you want to envision the future? Well, you look at other countries that's doing a phenomenal job. One of the examples is Finland. I mean, they're number one when it comes to education. And when Japan was coming out of World War II, it looked at America for how to be an industrial company, and they started being great at technology. When America was coming out of the turn of the century, we looked at Germany for their engineering tactics. So basically, history is repeating itself. You look at other countries doing a great job. So when it comes to education, we should be looking at Finland, for example, because they're doing number one. And some of the cool things about Finland, there's so many different things that Finland's doing, but one of the few takeaways was they do a foundational coverage. What that means is, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they cover the needs. So meals, health, dental, and psychological services like counseling are all covered, and it's all free and provided. And aside from that, once that's done, they have an interesting perspective when it comes to teaching. There's a lot more recess as opposed to teaching, and there's less teaching and a lot more intervening. What that means is, from what I'm reading, is they don't have a person in front of the chalkboard speaking and people listening. It's more of you guys get in groups and start figuring out your curriculum, what strengths and weaknesses you have planned for the week, and you guys do the same, and I'll come help whenever you guys need help. And I thought it was very interesting. The last part is they have a common core, and I know there's a huge pushback when it comes to the Common Core, but I think the Common Core is actually a good thing, so I'll get on that. Before I do that, this chart is also something interesting. Most of the teachers, so this color, whatever that is, light brown, is Finland. The middle is the United States, and the very right pink one is the average of all different states, all different nations. And what this is showing is how many hours the teachers spend teaching in the year in the classroom. And what you see is Finland spends the least amount of time teaching, which is quite, counterintuitive. Like, how can the best school in the world have the least amount of hours teaching? And that kind of goes back to how they're kind of inquiry-based, where they let the students figure out what to do, and they ask them the questions, and they let the students come up with the questions themselves as well. That's one of the takeaways I have from Finland. I think Finland is going to do a fantastic job, and there's a good chance that we should be copying them. And one of the things I think we did copy recently is the Common Core. And so there's a lot of pushback with the Common Core that I'm seeing online. And one of the things is the Common Core makes simple processes very complicated. So the very simple question is, how would students calculate 5% of 68? And the obvious answer is you multiply it by 0.05, and that works. So there's no need to do all these, how else would you do it? But then if you take a closer look at it, there's another way to do that, and that's 6.8 divided by 2, which you can do in your head. So how did you arrive at that conclusion? Well, it's, when you see 5%, 5% is half of 10%. And 10% of anything you can do in your head, because all you have to do is move the decimal point 1 to the left. So 10% of 68 is 6.8. So once you have the 10%, you can figure out 5% relatively easy by dividing that number by 2. So 6.8 divided by 2 is 3.4. And that's kind of the thing that the Common Core is trying to teach, is like, yes, there are structured ways to easily calculate things, but there are other more creative ways to do things. And that's kind of important, because now what's happening is computers are advancing so quickly that we're kind of becoming obsolete. We don't need to do these computations. We just have to figure out how to be creative with it. And that's kind of what the Common Core is trying to teach. So then the whole STEM movement is what we have right now. It's kind of the hot topic. We have science, technology, engineering, math, but there's something missing. And I'll prove that in a minute. So for instance, science, we have robotic arms that's doing bioengineering at phenomenally fast paces, because they run on electricity, they're accurate, they're clean. Whereas if you hire lab technicians, they're very expensive, they can only work 8 hours a day, and there's a chance for human error because hands are shaking, it's kind of hard to pipette, that kind of thing. And then we have Watson, the IBM computer. Watson just recently came out with a recipe for barbecue sauce, and people love it. And so basically, even the creative side is starting to be taken over by technology, which is, for better or for worse, whatever that may be. Boston Dynamics, they just got bought by Google. They're phenomenal making robots. This is one of their four-legged robots. If you kick this thing while it's moving, it'll readjust itself. It almost moves like an animal. And the idea is most likely it's going to be, Boston Dynamics is a military-funded company, so it might be the future of war, that kind of thing. Wolf and Alpha, they are a online-based mathematical computation software. But basically, it can do any sorts of calculations on Wolfram Alpha. It's like integrals, calculus, all those things can be done by it. And then now they just came out recently with the universal computer language that you can. The proposed theory is you can use this computer language to compute anything. So you can be like, what is the average age of Asians in America, and then plot that into a stochastic graph, that kind of thing, whatever. but Wolfram Alpha will figure that out for you rather quickly. So, all these things happening in science, technology, engineering, math, what's missing? There's a story of a company that makes soap, bar soap, and they were having issues in the assembly line because some of the soaps won't end up in the boxes, and once they're sealed, you can't open it to check. And the customers were getting empty boxes of soap. So then they hired a whole bunch of engineers and consultants to come up with a solution, and they came up with a fantastic solution, laser-guided weighting system that can figure out if there's soap in the box or not without opening it, so you can take away the empty boxes and not destroy the good product. And while they were giving this presentation, one of the managers asked the assembly line worker, "What do you think?" And the assembly line worker took a fan that was blowing air on him and turned it to the assembly line, and that blew away all the empty boxes, and that was a much more elegant, much more cheaper solution. So then the idea is it takes an artist to bend a straight line into a curve. So then what's missing from STEM is art. And what happens when you focus too much on science, technology, engineering, math, is you tend to squeeze out the other side of this, which is art, which is much more creative, much less technical. So then I think we should add art to it. I think we should call it STEAM because it's still one syllable and it's very, very marketable, and I think it's catchy. And that's it.